Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Eat the Chalk podcast brought to you by the DFS headquarters. Nick over there getting his hair ready as we get set to break down week 7 of the NFL season, DFS style. I can't believe we got to week 7. I didn't think it was going to happen. But before we get to that, he is at Nick from CWE. I am at HQ Golf Guy. The DFS headquarters is kind of that one-stop shop for all of your DFS needs. We've got the World Series going. We've got college football going. We've got PGA. We have a massive MMA event this week, maybe the fight of the year with Khabib and Gaethje. So a ton of stuff going on at the DFS headquarters. You get it all in one spot. It's less than $20 a month. Fantastic deal. Most places it's $20 per sport or more. Nick, we talk about looking fresh every week. Let's break it down. How are we looking? We look pretty good.
I'm looking like I just rolled out of bed, which is not terribly too far from the truth. I mean, I'm never actually ready for anything because, my existence is just gray sweatpants and a t-shirt. That's how I get to work. So nothing's really changed for me on that. We missed a week last week. I know both you and I are kind of like in our peak seasons. Yours is election related, which has to be the worst thing in the world. And mine is, a portion of our business is definitely holiday centric. So, I mean, we definitely have a little bit, of a busier time right now because we also want to not be slaves to our business, and we want to put ourselves in a position that we can enjoy the holidays as well. So we really have to pump hard these next few weeks to be able to have some time to try to regain our sanity. So we're excited to be back at it this week for sure. Last week was definitely a mixed bag. Is really bad. It's like a bad way of looking at it, I guess, for lack of better words. I know for me personally, like all week I sat and I was like, Derrick Henry. Like it was clear that, to me at least, it was clear that like this was absolutely a smash spot for him. But then, and conversely, I kind of felt like Madison was a little bit like, he's not Dalvin Cook. People automatically like, Miles Sanders is out. Boston Scott is definitely Miles Sanders now that he's being given the opportunity. And let's face it, Miles Sanders wasn't really there, or Boston Scott really wasn't there yesterday until he caught that touchdown pass. And we know how you can't really count on that in daily fantasy, but that touchdown pass accounted for like 8 of his 18 fantasy points. If that doesn't happen, if they don't get pushed back, it's a bad performance. And conversely, with Alexander Madison, like we knew that Kirk Cousins was likely to struggle because he's terrible. And the team just in general seems pretty bad, to be quite honest. They are a lot like the Cowboys. They are now going to be the Cowboys, where this team is just bad on both sides of the ball. And a lot of these, like fantasy performances, Kirk Cousins had like 8 fantasy points going into the fourth quarter. He finished with 29 fantasy points. Like Justin Jefferson had his score absolutely ridiculously inflated, and I played a lot of him. But my decision came down to Madison and Henry in cash games, and disappointingly, I went against my better judgment and played Madison because everyone else would, and really, I don't think it was that case. I don't think Madison was like such a dramatic amount owned in comparison to number 1 Henry, but number 2 where I thought he would be. So really, all I did was cannibalize my opportunities. Now I had Henry a lot in single entry tournaments, but since I'm playing my cash lineup in head to heads and stuff, it really just diminished my overall return. So it sucks. Like I feel like I still, after all these years with the NFL, just have to find a way to get better week in, week out, because I keep making like such bad decisions. And look, I'm going to go on record and I'm going to tell you what, this week is going to end up being one of my best weeks ever because I lost last week. And so my process is going to be this just very concise, here's what you have to do to win, and it's going to work. and then I'm gonna have a good week. I'm gonna turn $600 into $1,200 or $1,300 or $1,100, and then next week I'm gonna be like, okay, remember, just like every coach in the NFL, I'm gonna be like, okay, you remember what worked last week? Let's just throw that all away and try something new this time. It's super frustrating. Like, I wish I could, and it's really just the NFL. NASCAR, I can kind of keep, doing what works and it's not a problem. But the NFL, I don't know. I just really can't get a grasp on keeping it consistent, building my own lineups.
Well, let's break it down, get started right away. Let's get right to it. We've got probably what I think a lot of people would say will be a higher scoring game in Carolina and New Orleans at 1 o'clock. You got Drew Brees at 6,100, Alvin Kamara at 79. Murray is going to be at 48. Michael Thomas, we expect to play at 76. Sanders at 51. Jared Cook at 43. On the flip side, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be 58. Mike Davis, 66. I mean, still not a bad price for what he's been doing. DJ Moore, at 5,600. Robbie Anderson at 6,000 and Ian Thomas at 3,000. Do you agree with me in thinking this is going to be one of those high-scoring games, or do you think it's going to be one of those traps?
To me, it's trending like it's going to be a high-scoring game. It doesn't look good for Michael Thomas. I'm not sure. It's just, like the last report yesterday was he didn't practice. And the last he was seen was walking off the field with the trainer early in practice on Wednesday. So,
okay.
Normally I'd say, well,
his injury, or was it his fist?
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like, and this is what makes it terrible, and it actually is a really good leverage spot if he plays, I think, is when these guys that deal with like leg injuries, specifically like hamstring injuries, especially when it happens during the season, it's not like an easy recovery. And like a lot of times there's situations where like they're just not the same pretty much the whole season because they don't get, and it, especially making it worse. Didn't the Saints have a bye last week?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
they played, but Thomas didn't play, correct?
I have no idea. I don't remember but it is what it is. But no, they didn't play because I didn't get to play Kamara. I haven't been season-long reason I was not able to play him. Anyway,
due to the punishment.
Regardless of how I know Thomas did not play in the last game because of punishment. You are correct.
Okay.
So, okay, we've said a bunch of words, but the reason we're saying it is because Michael Thomas is like the single most important player on this slate. For this reason, if he doesn't play, it likely elevates Alvin Kamara to like super chalk, right? And I mean, if you're telling me right now Michael Thomas is out, Alvin Kamara is the first person in my cash game lineup. It's no questions asked. It is what it is. We know that this Carolina run defense is absolutely terrible. And in truth, that doesn't necessarily like super benefit Kamara, right? Because that's not how he's used. He's a super back. But they're just not a good defense. And it doesn't matter that he's not a traditional like through the tackles running back. He is going to have all the chance in the world to be the focal point of the offense against a terrible defense. So, yeah, I mean, if Thomas is out, what are we really talking about here? I really think it's a situation where you've got a 15-point floor just in his receiving, probably 17-point floor if you count in his rushing. And what's the ceiling? 35, 40 points? Like if he gets in the end zone a couple times, if he has over 100 yards receiving, which is entirely possible.
Well, against Carolina, you got to almost consider that ceiling more than the floor.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know it didn't work for David Montgomery last week, but he wasn't terrible. He literally just got shit out of luck, tackled at like the 0.1 yard line and didn't get a touchdown, which would have salvaged his day at his price. I think that Latavius Murray, this is an interesting week where even in large field tournaments, like I'm tempted by the idea of Murray Kamara stacks because number one, nobody's going to do it. Number two, it just reminds me of a time that happened like once in DFS, and it was the most, you'll never see this happen again, but eventually it'll happen again when Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman were both on GPP winning lineups together in a week. And it was like, wait, how did this happen? But it happened because, Devonta Freeman was getting a lot of like the receptions, and that led to opportunities to score. And Tevin Coleman was, running it up the gut and able to score touchdowns on the ground. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that could happen. If Michael Thomas plays, I think that puts me with an even greater interest in Alvin Kamara, because I think that Kamara's ownership is going to take a bigger dive if Thomas is in the game. And can we really, really, really confidently say a Thomas that's dealing with a hamstring injury is going to be anything more than a high-level decoy? Like, he'll get catches. It's not to say that he's just going to be there the whole time and it's always just going to be he's only, only on the field to pull defenders off. But I think there's a high probability. So that situation, like, for me, is really going to define how the slate sets up. The Carolina side of the ball, we get another week of Mike Davis. He was not good last week. Chicago has a decent enough defense that it's not shocking that he had some struggles. And it was also a slower paced game. I really haven't got to look at like how New Orleans plays to really like give a definitive, like, okay, we might be in trouble again because they don't play fast enough. And if they're not going to play fast enough, that really diminishes the opportunity that, that we get. I'm trying to see if they have some of this up on one of the sites I use so that we can actually like say, hey, it's a good shot that this game is going to be really slow or this game is going to be really fast. And it definitely checks in as one of like the slower paced games. So I don't know. Like I think you're okay with Mike Davis. I think you're okay. I definitely think you're okay with like Anderson and DJ Moore. I think further and further this season goes, it's going to become more and more frustrating unless one of them gets injured to really decide which one is going to be the guy to roster on a week-to-week basis. I think a lot of the predictive signs, like air yards and things like that, point to DJ Moore a little bit more. I tend to actually, it would be an interesting study, like expected versus reality. I think as fantasy players, especially savvy fantasy players, you like get hooked into stats sometimes and kind of start using that as like an end all be all. Why are you pointing?
You're savvy, not me.
Oh, but it's like savvy to a fault, right? Like it's how much does the stat really matter is what I'm trying to say. Like air yards, that's cute. That's how many times, somebody's getting like the amount of yards they could have had.
Beckham is the king of that, and Beckham rarely produces.
And Michael Williams is the same. Mike Williams for the Chargers is kind of the same thing. Like he's been a air yards god, but like just doesn't produce. So, there has to be some translation where it really becomes effective. And so, yeah, that's the constant battle you're fighting is like, should I play DJ Moore? Should I play Robbie Anderson? Some weeks they've been, but I agree with you in a whole, whereas this game jumps off the page from a statistical perspective, like, like maybe it will be a little bit slower. I think the Saints have a good enough defense. I don't know. I feel like this is one of those games where, Drew Brees gets out there. He takes a big old dookie on the floor because he can't see above the offensive and defensive line. Can't find it.
Dependent? Is he Michael Thomas, or is he just unusable even with Mike Thomas at this point?
I don't think he's like Michael Thomas dependent. I think that when you have someone of Thomas's skill set, it's only going to accentuate the high-end output for your quarterback. But I think if anything, he's Alvin Kamara dependent for sure, because Kamara like gives him those little dump off opportunities, and Kamara's skill set really allows for.
Are we considering Brees this week at all?
Honestly, I haven't like I haven't really like deep dived into the slate. I tend to not want to play Drew Brees much. I think he's priced reasonably. Like outside of Tampa Bay, he hasn't had any like bad outings, but he hasn't done anything over the top. I wouldn't hate it, because there's always that shot that like he goes 404. That's in the realm of possibilities. And how many times have we just not even considered Tom Brady even this year? And I feel like there's been a few times where he's put up tournament winning performances that nobody even talks about, right? You don't even hear it like after it happens. People aren't like, whoa, did you see Tom Brady had 35 points? But he did.
The reason that we're spending so much time talking about this game is because I don't think anyone's going to want to talk about the next game. The Bills and the Jets. You can probably play some Bills guys, but at what point do they kind of pump the brakes on things when they get up by enough? The Jets are unplayable. Kind of going through it. Allen is 77, Singletary 58, Moss 42, Diggs 7. They've got to score some points to get that lead. So, we're obviously on the Bills players here. Is it Diggs? Is it Singletary? Who kind of piques your interest here in Buffalo at the Jets?
I think for me, this would be a week where I would try to leverage the rare running back defense stack. I actually don't think Buffalo's defense is very good, personally. They've got a real issue across the middle of the field that the Titans were able to exploit with Jonnu Smith and A.J. Brown that Kansas City was able to achieve last week with Travis Kelce. And Kansas City doesn't count ever. Just they don't count. You can't look at them and be like, oh, they did this to this team. Their offense is so good that if they wanted to stretch the field with Tyreek Hill, they could have done it. They could have pushed the issue. They just didn't need to. They found other ways to get ahead. But I just don't think the biggest problem is like Jamison Crowder is the last I looked, he's trending doubtful to play. So you just have a team that's literally bereft of playmakers. There's no you look at that team and it's just like, okay, Jeff Smith, I guess at like 3K. Mm-hmm. If Crowder's out, he's going to get maybe like a dozen really bad targets. So I guess the possibility is there if you want to go that route. On the Buffalo side, like I said, it's Moss at 4,200. I genuinely think they would rather play Moss than Singletary. I think that if anyone other than Josh Allen is getting carries near the goal line, it's definitely going to be Moss over Singletary. $4,200 it's a small price to pay, but I just don't think the ceiling is that high. I really don't. I think that the likelihood of him snapping off like 2 touchdowns in a game is in the single-digit percentages. And that's what you need, I think, to like really, unless he breaks a long run from, his 10-yard line, because I think it's pretty clear, like Singletary is going to get a lot of the looks between the 20s and Moss is going to get, 30% of those and then 80% of the high leverage carries. So I think, there's definitely potential there, but overall it's just a pretty shitty game.
The other thing is when you're dealing with, how many times do we have to hear we have to get Michael Pirine more carries? We have to get him more carries, and then Frank Gore. At what point do you just end that disaster of a backfield? Detroit at Atlanta, another game that I think could kind of have. Well, obviously with Atlanta, you're going to have a ton of DFS points. Got some questions at wide receiver though with both Julio and Calvin. Questionable, but we come into this one. Matt Stafford at 65, Adrian Peterson at 46, DeAndre Swift now up to 5,400, Kenny Galladay at 67. The Lions have their own questionables with Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola, so we'll see about that. But again, the Falcons have Matt Ryan at 67, Gurley at 6,000, and Gage is going to be 4,400, and again Ridley 73, Jones 71. So we'll see about their ability to play.
I like this game. For sure.
Now, is that if the Stars play, or is that no matter what?
Oh, it's going to be no matter what, mm-hmm. I think, because, again, you're dealing with a situation where I think that the Detroit defense is bad enough to sustain guys like Russell Gage and Hayden Hurst and Olamide Zacchaeus or whatever his name is. Like, I think there's possibilities for all of those guys to really have a shot, even if Ridley and Julio miss. I don't think that's going to be the case. They're limited participants. That's more towards good than bad. I think we'd obviously have to agree with that. Mm-hmm. Stafford was a somewhat popular, maybe he wasn't like high level popular, but I saw him getting talked up enough last week against, I think they played Minnesota last week. I inevitably already forget because it's been 7 weeks since last week. But it really feels like this could be an actual like blow up spot for Stafford here. We haven't seen it at all this year, period. There's just been no Stafford games. This was a guy who was really accelerating last year before the injury to being a top-tier fantasy producer. Not enough has changed, in my opinion, to really advocate not looking at him this week. I think it sets up really well. I think from a multitude of perspectives, after seeing DeAndre Swift's involvement last week, I think a lot of people may be willing to trust a Detroit running back, which I would advocate being a very bad move.
No.
Historically has produced much better with Kenny Golladay in the lineup. This also is as frustrating as what I'm about to say is going to be to hear. It still is a reality that this sets up nicely to be a Marvin Jones game because he just has one game a year, every year, where he absolutely breaks things. And they are usually in matchups where after the fact, you're able to look back and be like, okay, I can understand how he got there. I'm definitely not like advocating playing him in anything like cash or anything like that, but he's interesting. I think Kenny Golladay is for sure on the cash radar. 6,700 for a guy who can, get you 100 yards and a couple of scores is a small price to pay compared to where some of the other guys are priced at. Hawkinson is steady. I mean, that's about all you can say about him is he hovers between 9 and 10 points every week. I feel like he's also a candidate to eventually have some kind of a like blow up game. I'm going to have some pieces there. But yeah, I think for cash, I typically want to go with a quarterback who could give me a little bit of running upside. I think people forget that Stafford will vulture like very short yard touchdown carries on occasion. It's not like a reliable thing, but he definitely, I know from playing Detroit running backs in years past that he likes to do the jump up in the air and put the ball over the goal line.
Kind of Brady-like in a way.
It is. It's very Brady-like, yes. It's a guy that you just attribute to being a statue in the pocket, but like when they get to the 1 yard line, they will do what they can to kind of let him move the ball. So on the Atlanta side of the ball, I mean, look, Todd Gurley it has proven to be just completely and totally touchdown dependent unless he's facing Carolina. Since touchdowns are unpredictable, he's someone I consider on a week-to-week basis. And then, we talked about their pass catching options, and pretty much all of them are in play. It's always frustrating. In DFS, it really feels like for the most part, it's just easier to take Calvin Ridley, even though he's usually more expensive because there's the perceived higher touchdown equity upside. It's going to be interesting to see when and if that actually changes because you would think as a coach, if you have two really, really good receivers on a team and you're constantly putting the double coverage on Julio and Calvin Ridley is getting off consistently, you would say maybe we should try to cover Calvin Ridley and see what Julio does because no offense to Julio, at some point there's going to be a diminishing of skill set. And so like, it's almost like I wonder where there's a tipping point where Julio starts to see some of the more like high leverage targets because teams are starting to give way more respect to Calvin Ridley. I don't think it's going to happen soon. It's just a purely theoretical question.
Another 1:00 matchup, the Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, just talk about thrilling. I mean, everyone's making sure they catch that one. We got Baker at 56, Odell at 61, Landry questionable at 46. The question here is Kareem Hunt's health. Apparently, there's some injury coming up with him. He's questionable. He's at 68. If not, Dearness Johnson would be a good play at 4,000, I believe. Hooper at 4,000 as well. On the flip side, you've got, let's see here, Joey Burrow at 55. Mixon also questionable at 63. Gio at 45. You've got Boyd at 54 and Higgins at 53. Another game where we've got to take a look at those questionables and kind of figure it out from there.
Yeah, this is a frustrating one because, again, absolute smash spot for Kareem Hunt against a team that he's already, that Cleveland has already dominated on the ground one time this year. Obviously, that's something that's a very exciting situation if we're able to get, Cleveland in a position where Hunt seems like he's good to go. There are some concerns because his pass game role has been cut back pretty significantly to where he's only getting like 3 targets. And at first glance, he was like, before the Michael Thomas stuff, he was like player number 1 or player number 2 that I was dropping into my lineups and just kind of saying like, all right, this is the path I'm going with. I'm going to go with this guy. I don't know where I'm at.
Can Dearness Johnson be a play at 4,000 if Hunt is out?
I mean,
I hate
to say it, but I think that he's someone you can look at because schematically, I don't think the Browns are going to just try to change what they're doing because, unfortunately for them, they are captained by Baker Mayfield at quarterback, and he's not a guy who is going to produce high outcomes very often. He's not very good. The biggest slight, and what I think a lot of people were in this area, because I'm from Northeast Ohio, and a lot of the talk was just that offensive line has been so bad for Cleveland. Like, he's never had a chance. He's just had to run around constantly. But there are metrics out there that show that the Browns' offensive line has been good this year, and Baker still is not able to go through his progressions and make good decisions. So at some point, it stops being about all of the things around him, and it starts being about him. And I really think that's my biggest concern. And that's probably the coach, because Kevin Stefanski, I don't think he is a dumb guy. I think he understands that his best shot to success is going to be using the players in the way that are going to give them the best opportunity to win. And I think even with Chubb and Hunt off the field in this matchup, it's still probably the running game that gives them the best opportunity to win, and running trick plays so that Odell and Jarvis Landry can play quarterback and have a higher percent success rate throwing passing touchdowns that Baker is going to have.
We are live on YouTube right now. If you have any questions, you want to pump them up, throw them up there, we'll answer them live. We can do that now. It's technology. It's fun stuff. At DFS headquarters is the one-stop shop for all your DFS needs. When you take a look at Cincinnati on the flip side, Gio had a score last week. If Mixon doesn't go, is there anywhere you're going to look? Higgins, where are you going to look at Cincinnati at all? Is there any point?
I mean, if Mixon doesn't go, it's 100% lock and load Gio Bernard. I mean, it wouldn't even be a question for me. Because at that point, I mean, I think people will come up with reasons to say that I'm trying to figure out, like, Samaje Perine is going to get more looks. Travion Williams, who didn't even suit up this year, is going to get, but like, the reality is it's just going to be 100% usage in the pass game for Gio Bernard. It's going to be, 65% usage in the running game. Like, it is for DFS, it's a best case scenario, because even last year when Mixon missed a couple of games, I think people were just not really that interested in playing Gio, and he was just a stud. And I think that's exactly what will happen this time is people will look at that and be like, Gio, who knows? I could be wrong, but I would play the hell out of him at that price. I mean, what is he like? $500 above minimum price for a running back?
He's 4,500. D'Ernest is 4,000 on the dot. So
yeah, I mean,
over Johnson.
In this situation, and it would be really interesting discussion if both of those guys missed because I really, but to me, it actually probably wouldn't be because there are two running backs that I'm like, these are guys I'm playing, and there's no questions that I'm playing them. So like, there's only room for one other person, right? So,
well, unless you make a bunch of lines, then you can.
And then, I think one of Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, you could basically play for Cincinnati every week, and I'm convinced one of the two of those will probably pay off their price. So, I wouldn't hesitate to look their direction either.
At some point, Tyler Boyd has to start to live up to some of the preseason expectations that were thrown on him. What will probably end up being the game that most people kind of gravitate towards this week will be the Green Bay Packers at the Houston Texans, 1:00 on Sunday. Just a fantastic spot for a lot of these guys. Aaron Rodgers is going to be 7,000. Aaron Jones at 72. Devontae going to be 79. MVS is going to be 41. Tanyan is questionable, as we seem to have a lot of those at 46. Taking a look at some of the other numbers here. Deshaun at 68. David Johnson at 53. Will Fuller, who's been fantastic this year, except for that one game where he just was invisible. 6,800. Brandon Cooks coming alive here since the firing of Bill O'Brien at 52. An interesting one here at tight end because if Akins at 3,200 is out, then you go to Fells at 41, and Fells has done really well when Akins is out.
Yeah, so in stock trading, which I've been doing with my fantasy winnings and doing better at stocks except for today than fantasy.
Mickey day trader?
Yeah, exactly. It's been I don't have I'm not throwing $100,000 into each trade. It's only like 5,000, which is still a pretty ridiculous amount for someone who only marginally knows what they're doing. But there's something that's called like a boner chart where you see it and everything lines up. Like it could be that the stock is a flag formation, and when it breaks that upper resistance and starts moving upward, it has a large gap to fill, and it could be a really strong runner. And a great way if you're day trading to put some money into something that could fly real quick. Obviously nothing is 100% for sure, but like those are stocks that could be real big winners real quick. This game is like a boner game, okay? Because every facet of what you look at here is an ideal situation. This offense looked great. Oh, well, the Houston offense looked great. The Green Bay offense looked like dog shit. But the Houston offense, which is the side of the ball, if you're looking at these two things, like that you'd be more concerned about, right? Like how can you – because we're just so trained because of Bill O'Brien to expect Houston to come out and fall on their face. To me, this lines up as a game where in tournaments, I'm going to be over the field on both of the quarterbacks in the game. No questions asked. Aaron Jones, up until the Mike Thomas news, was my favorite running back on the slate. After watching what Derrick Henry did to them last week, and then not even just that so much, but like Jones is a huge part of this offense. Like even with Devontae Adams back, it's not a situation where we expect Aaron Jones to just like fall back and just be there. At the end of the day, as crazy as this sounds, I think you're likely to see more peak Aaron Jones games than you are Devontae Adams games because the team still wants to run the ball. That's in that DNA. And because Jones is so involved in the passing game as well, of course, there's obviously paths to failure for any team or any whatever, but like this feels like a rock hard spot for Jones to get to that 25-point mark. And then you can stack him with Rodgers. You can not play them together. You could throw Devontae Adams in there. You could throw, Big Bobby Tonyan in there. he didn't practice, so that's not good. And rest assured, if he's out, like there's no one else, right? Just there's no one else at the tight end position.
We had a question.
Yeah, we do have a question.
The question is how much of this game is too much in terms of, you talked in the past about going back in that reverse stack. So you stack one, come back with a receiver on the other side. Is there a point where you come back with more than a receiver on the other side?
It doesn't work a lot. Again, we're talking like strictly looking at what optimal lineups are. It's not to say that you can't do that and still cash, but really through the year, it has been quarterback, 2 pass catchers from the quarterback, 1 pass catcher from the opposing team. It's typically not a running back. It's typically like a wide receiver, tight end in the stack. Okay. So that has been like 5 out of the 6 weeks what an optimal has looked like. So you really need a game to really break the slate to where it's like 42-38. It reminds me of a game Houston was in a couple years ago against Seattle, where like all of the stacks were like Seattle, it was Wilson, Lockett, other person, Hopkins, Fuller, and it was a 5 total piece stack. I could definitely see that being the case here, because that Green Bay is going to be playing pissed. I mean, they looked as bad as a team could look. They were in a game that, for the second time this year, this was like the second game where you were like, okay, the first game was Baltimore and Kansas City, and that was a real downer, because it just Baltimore didn't show up. And so you were looking out. I think a lot of people were kind of sneakily looking at this game like, okay, this is going to be the biggest game of the year that is actually like 2 teams that could be it. And it shit the bed again. Only one side of the football performed. So I think Rodgers and company are going to be, coming out of the woodwork to really try to make this case. So it's interesting. Like, I don't hate any of these. I don't know that I'll use. I just have to see what I want to use one of these 2 quarterbacks in cash. I don't think I'll be able to use one of these 2 quarterbacks in cash, because as of right now, I'm playing a very high-priced Kamara, a very high-priced Aaron Jones, and if it looks like Kareem Hunt is in position to play, he's going to be my 3rd running back. So it doesn't leave like a huge opportunity there to play a top-tier quarterback. But if we get a Geo or something like that, then that does open up, because I think that you could witness a scenario where both of these guys get to like 35 fantasy points.
One other question. I'm going to take this one, though, because it's an interesting question. Showdown round 2 help. When it low-owned player you like? So I'm guessing that's because my name is HQ Golf Guy. Not quite the right show. We'll go with Dylan Fratelli. Okay, back to football. Dallas.
I wasn't ignoring that. I could see it too. I just wanted to kind of get through what we were talking about before.
I'm gonna guess we're going to throw in some golf here.
Hey, we can talk college football. I'd rather talk college football than the NFL too, even though DraftKings doesn't work with a provider that's skilled enough to get the Big Ten and the Mountain. And that's super disappointing, because there's a huge edge like the first week of the season, and that's really what we're on. And so like now I have to sit back and it's just like, okay, I can't use the research I've done to benefit myself. And then FanDuel didn't even have a slate up yesterday when I went down to enter lineup. So it's just both companies really have not been putting their best foot forward. I'm very disappointed in them. I'm going to give them a serious tongue lashing
every week on FanDuel.
Yeah.
They got that up.
All right. Yeah.
So we'll go Brian Harmon, Dylan Fratelli. Dallas, Washington. There's some spots here. Kyle Allen, we expect to start at 5,200. Gibson at 5,000. McKissick at 46. Terry McLaurin is going to be 5,800. On the flip side, Andy Dalton 6,000. Zeke at 78. Coop at 69. Gallup at 46, and CD Lamb at 65. Dalton Schultz at 39, and then Logan Thomas at 35. A lot of people talking about McKissick last week, the performance he had. That just makes me kind of want to go back to Gibson if there's a place for him anywhere.
Well, I think the good thing was, too, they decided last week that it made a lot of sense to get Peyton Barber more involved, too. So it's always something you want to see. I stand by the fact that Ron Rivera might be second to Adam Gase now as the worst coach left in the NFL. Has really just shown extraordinarily poorly. I'll say it every week. It's just, I mean, look, all this guy should have done is said, I didn't pick Dwayne Haskins. I brought Kyle Allen with me. I'm going to start him. Okay, it's my team. This is the decision I made. Instead, he opted to set Dwayne Haskins up for the fall, and when he fell, rather than say, well, let's try to help him, he said, Kyle Allen time, let's do it. And then it's not going to be an experiment that works well. This game, like 2 weeks ago, we would have been like, oh, shit, like this game, this might be something. I don't trust Zeke here. I don't know if you noticed, but like Dallas is out of offensive linemen. I think after last week, none of their starting offensive linemen are active. One of them opted out. 3 of them are injured. 1 of them retired. So you literally have no starters from an offensive line that was very, very good. And not only that, now you have you lack the explosive playmaking ability of Dak Prescott and turn to Andy Dalton, which was fully exposed by an Arizona defense that's not that good. And then they get a Washington front 4 at least who can put a lot of pressure on an offensive line who is bad at this point. Like that's all we could say is they were bad. They were bad against Arizona. I can't expect them to be anything but bad against Washington. So it really diminishes, in my opinion, my interest in playing a lot. And this could be a fish take. It could be just like, oh, Washington is actually so bad in the backfield that as long as Dalton has 5 seconds, he can get the ball off and, handle things that way. But man, I feel very uncomfortable with all the prices. The only guy I would look at, again, because it's price related, would be Dalton Schultz. I think he makes a lot of sense at his price because he's a dump off guy and Dalton has a history of using tight ends when they were healthy in Cincinnati. So, I think that's an easy look for Dalton there. I never want to advocate against Zeke. This is definitely one of the weeks you'll get Zeke at his lowest ownership all year, even though it is on paper, minus the offensive line issues, a good matchup, right? But at that price, it's super hard to say play Zeke when you have the other guys in a position like Jones and Kamara and even Kareem Hunt. On the flip side, I'm not touching that backfield. There's, I'm not playing McKissick. I'll always have Antonio Gibson on the heart because I think he's the far better player. But again, I can't trust this coaching staff to actually get him involved. He's had one good game this year. And for a rookie, that's not bad. He wasn't like a first round guy, but I would not mind taking some shots at McLaurin here because he's not dependent on the deep ball. And I really believe that this Dallas defense is bad enough that McLaurin could take slants a lot further than they should. So, like I said, this would have been a game a couple weeks ago we would have been ranting and raving about because of what Prescott had been doing. But without him in the scenario, I think it really brings everybody's upside crashing down a lot.
Pittsburgh heads south to Tennessee in what should be a great defensive game. If there was ever a week where you're like, okay, Derrick Henry may not do what Derrick Henry normally does, this may be the week. But then you've also got to consider that the Pittsburgh Steelers just lost my boy Devin Bush for a considerable amount of time. Big Ben at 66, James Conner at 67, Juju 55, Chase Claypool at 57, Deontay Johnson at 4,200, Eric Ebron at 4,000. On the flip side, we have Tannehill at 62, Derrick Henry at 75, A questionable A.J. Brown at 63, Corey Davis at 48, and Johnny Smith at 47, and Ferkser, who has a tendency to score some touchdowns at 3,000. This is just going to be one of those dogfights, just punch each other in the mouth, right?
This has a lot of sneaky upside.
Okay.
I really think it does, because I think, first of all, Tennessee's defense is terrible, so it is not a good defense. They're terrible, horrible. Also, Derrick Henry is matchup proof. I mean, there's nobody that I do not give it. I love the idea of people not playing Derrick Henry, because Pittsburgh is Miles Sanders gashed these guys. What's that?
You're not playing Derrick Henry.
I'm not.
Oh, you've already given me your 3 running backs already, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not playing Derrick Henry in cash, no, but Derrick Henry is going to be like my top non-cash running back play, because, again, my belief, and it could just be something I'm making up as a reason, because I'm a Derrick Henry fanatic. Someone I bought a lot of merchandise into when he first, when he was coming to the NFL, because I'm from the North, and when we got stuff from Derrick Henry up here, it just sat around a lot. Nobody wanted to buy it, so I bought it. This is just like the perfect spot to get Derrick Henry at sub 10% ownership. I have a firm belief that the team wants to try to keep Henry, like, Henry's going to be used more as a focal point as the season goes on. I really believe that. I think that the Tennessee, what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to move the ball with, like, with A.J. Brown, with Humphreys, with Ferkser, all those guys, to just, get Derrick Henry in positions to where he's not facing a stacked box. And then, boom, the big dog eats, and he finishes with another 100-yard multi-touchdown game. Now, to break the slate, he needs to go like 200, or he needs to go 150 and 3. And I firmly believe all of those are within the realm of possibility. So it's not a case where it can't happen. And then I don't know, like,
am I allowed to disagree with you?
Yeah,
because I don't see it. I think Pittsburgh's defense, even without Devin Bush, holds Derrick Henry to nowhere near value.
I mean, we'll see. Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry's only had like one bad game this year, and it was really, and it's not to say he can't have bad games. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But like, a portion of this podcast is just trying to look at, like, what do we think everyone else is going to do, and realize that just because Kamara and Aaron Jones and Kareem Hunt and these guys are in good spots doesn't mean that, look at Aaron Jones last week. He didn't have a good game. The only reason he did as good as he did was because they kind of screwed Aaron Rodgers on his rushing touchdown, and it was able to be a situation where Jones took that in. Absent that, I mean, you would have had like a crippling effort from Aaron Jones. So it's not to say that things like that can't happen, and we're sitting here and Zeke and Henry are combined 75 points, and everyone's like, well, shit, why didn't we just play these two together? Because it's really easy to do that. I don't know. I think, A.J. Brown now hits that territory where
if he plays,
the price is coming up. If he doesn't play, I got to be honest, I didn't know that. I actually hadn't clicked over to the next tab yet, because I really have not been able to start my NFL research, like in-depth research, until like Saturday night. I'm dead serious. Like, it's gotten to that point in the year, because we have NASCAR, we have college football, we have all of these things going at this point.
That's called the DFS headquarters.
It is. We do a lot of things, and it's championship season in the NASCAR series. So, and yeah, there we go. I don't even know what's going on in the World Series. I don't really care, but anyway, if A.J. Brown misses, I will be honest in saying I have a little less interest in Derrick Henry, and maybe even a lot less interest, because A.J. Brown is a dynamic enough player that he really changes basically like everything about a team, right? Like, it becomes a dramatically different situation if he's off the field. the skill players around him are not like good enough. I say that in a very like unfortunately demeaning tone, but it would be a bad situation is the point I'm trying to drive home. I think Adam Humphries is good. Like I'm really not trying to like poo-poo. I'm just saying like it takes some of the shine off of what I think Henry's ability to really go off would be, because it's at that point, if you have Henry and you have, let's say that the team is comprised of like 3 well above average players at the position. I am going to give the rub to Jonnu Smith because I do think he is an above average player at the position. If you take A.J. Brown off the field, now that defenses really only have to really key in on 2 guys. It's very unlikely that they're going to that Adam Humphrey is going to beat them. You know what I mean? Adam Humphreys can be good for fantasy, but he's not going to be a guy that beats them. They're just going to say, stack the box, let them throw 6-yard passes to Adam Humphreys. So, I mean, I would like him for DFS in that instance. I'd like Ferkser. I would really like Khalif Raymond. He seems to be a guy that they're fairly high on. He would be a decent tournament shot because I think there's upside for 80 yards and a touchdown and potentially more. On the Steelers side of the ball, that's where stuff gets really, really, really confusing. Surprisingly, I kind of don't feel great about James Conner in this matchup. I'm not sure why. I just feel like this is going to be a situation where Ben airs it out a little bit more. And that's the kind of hairy part, because as bad as he's been from a production standpoint this year, you still have Juju Smith there. Deontay Johnson, I don't think Claypool has forced him out of the rotation, right? I think that it's more Claypool Washington than it is Claypool or Deontay. So now someone who Ben has shown an affinity to throwing to in the limited time he's been on the field is going to be back, and he's 4,200, it's just an absolutely stupid price, just a really stupid price. And then you still have Eric Ebron, who has not shown the touchdown vulture volume that we've seen in years past, but it's a much less concentrated situation that you'd really want it to be, less to the fact that Connor is adept at catching passes as well, and putting him into the mix really fuckers things up pretty well.
What is your thought when we talk about Chase Claypool for a second here? Excuse me. You say Deontay Johnson at 4,200 is a dynamite price, but with so many options, will you kind of, I don't want to say force him into your lineups, but is Deontay a guy that you're going to look heavily to, or does the amount of guys that you just don't know who can catch the ball going to kind of throw you off of him, even in your MME kind of lineups?
So, I mean, I'm a guy who really doesn't like money, apparently. But you're looking at a guy in Johnson who had 23 targets in the first 2 weeks of the season. And those were the only 2 games he was healthy. And now am I sitting here saying that I expect him to have 11 targets? I don't know that I'm necessarily saying that, but I am saying that I don't know if another player on that team has been targeted as much, even the rest of the season, that Johnson had been in that span. So especially in a case where we've talked about some high-priced quarterbacks and we need some value, that's the guy thus far as we're going through this that just screams hey, what about me? And really this game could end up being the answer to all of our how do we make it fit questions, because like we said, if Brown is out, Tannehill's not going to have 0 passing yards. I mean, there's an argument that Tannehill probably has a higher potential for yards with Brown out, which seems less intuitive. But when you start thinking defense is key on Derrick Henry, that's going to force Tannehill to have to throw more. And we actually saw Jacksonville really try to do that. And that's a game that Henry was kind of shut out of things, is they really made a concerted effort. As bad as Jacksonville is, they were we're not going to let Derrick Henry beat us. And Ryan Tannehill did, but still, they didn't let Derrick Henry beat them. So if the Steelers, who are much more able to say we're not going to let Derrick Henry beat us and actually force that issue, then you could see all of these ancillary pieces from Smith to Humphrey to Khalif Raymond to all of these guys end up with, bigger games, making them really solid cash game pieces. And really they have upside for tournaments, because what if Humphreys goes 8 for 100 and a touchdown? Like, that's almost 30 fantasy points at basically free.
We are not quite there yet, but I'm looking at the DraftKings website, and it shows the Tampa Bay Vegas game at 4:00. But on the classic, in the classic offerings, the classic contests, it also shows the 8:20 game. So I don't know how they're going to handle that. But
all right. So what I believe I read about this is that both of the games are going to be on the slate, and that it's reverted back to how it used to be, like 3 years ago, when they had the Sunday night but not the Monday night. Do you remember a time in DFS where they had all of the games, including Monday night, on the main slate?
When every game wasn't a showdown game? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I remember those days. But let's go out to Las Vegas, our first of the Nick special 4:00 games. Nick loves the 4:00 games, if you didn't know that. He's a big fan of having numerous 4:00 games. Obviously, the big news here is COVID with the Raiders, and I think basically the entire offensive line, except for one guy, has been placed on COVID. Possible they could be lifted off that by Sunday, so we will see how that happens, but that could have a big impact. Taking a look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we got Thomas Brady at 6,600, Ronald Jones at 62, and then a whole bunch of question marks at wide receiver. Evans questionable, Godwin questionable, Miller questionable, 63, 64, 37, Gronkowski questionable at 46. So a lot of injury concerns there in Tampa. Derek Carr at 54, Josh Jacobs at 63, but who's playing Josh Jacobs when who knows who's playing offensive line? Ruggs at 48, Aguilar at 39, Renfro at 42, Darren Waller at 61. You load up on some Tampa Bay, take a chance in some MME and load up on some Bucks, or is the question still just skip the game because who knows who's playing and who knows?
Yeah, I mean, as long as this game plays, this is pretty easy to me. You play their best running back in the game, Ronald Jones, and the Tampa Bay defense, and move on. I know that Carr has performed better than expected for most people. There's nothing I see here. Could it be a letdown spot for Tampa Bay after just absolutely demolishing what we thought was going to be a really good, Green Bay? Sure, it's possible, but I think there's just far too many other games in good spots. And actually really looking at this afternoon slate, it's kind of shitty.
Well, it is, especially for DFS, because let's move on. Good luck with San Francisco in New England, because San Francisco, you've got Mostert out. He's not playing. Then you go McKinnick, Hasty, Jeff Wilson will be reactivated. So, I mean, really, what do you do at running back there? I'd probably pass that on that. No one's playing Garoppolo. Debo at 5,000, Brandon Ayuk at 41, and Kittle obviously at 65. And then on the flip side with New England, you've got Newton at 63, Harris at 45, White at 49, Edelman questionable at 5. Then you've got Harry and Bird at 39 and 38, respectively. No thanks.
Yeah, this game feels like another slow game. I just don't feel like it's one of those games. It's two teams that I feel like are just going to try to run the ball. I don't know that either team can actually have success with that either, which makes all of the receivers in the game a little more interesting, especially considering they're all free. Like no receiver in this game priced above 500 or 5K. It's pretty crazy, including Edelman, which is, I know he hasn't had the best season, but still that's like a okay. But yet I still don't love anything here. Like this is not a game where I'm spending up on Kittle. Just my opinion. I just don't really see the need to go that route. Even Cam, like we had a decision to make in like one of the home leagues I'm in between Cam and Carson Wentz. And even though I would die on the hill that Cam is like a way better quarterback and Carson Wentz just really only comes around like, again, he's like that 3.5 to fourth quarter quarterback where he gets most of his stats, it seems. We did opt for Wentz, and it ends up looking like that's going to end up being a really good decision, all things considered. I just don't feel great about this. Doesn't seem like a game where Cam not that he's not needed, but like if they're not running, the reason he scored so many points against Seattle is it was just a fast-paced game. I don't think that that's what either side is going to go for here. And unless both sides move down the field and score and it's just a one-upsmanship game, I just don't see how Cam gets there. And yeah, I mean, these receiver plays, like, okay, we can use some of them, but like nothing really pops out as like, oh man, we got to get a piece of that. Like, I just, again, I don't like Ayuk at 4,100. Okay. Damiere Byrd at 38. Okay. But like, I feel like there's a 15-point cap on all of them.
Going back to home leagues, I know this is a question that we're going to get in the chat because we have guys that play, obviously, DFS. That's what we do, but also guys who play season-long leagues. So let me just hit you with this one quick question because we have blown through a couple of these games. McKinnon, for some reason, and it may be, for probably a valid reason, most people don't think he's going to be the bell cow with Mostert out. Hasty obviously played well, but we've seen situations where guys come into a game unexpectedly, play well, and then I got completely out of the game plan the next week. Jeff Wilson Jr., what do you do in that situation in a season long?
If you have McKinnon, I'd play him, but I mean, otherwise you're taking like, this isn't Jeff Wilson against Miami, like New England has a good enough defense that it shouldn't be a case where Jeff Wilson's getting the opportunity to score 3 goal line touchdowns. I really don't see that being the case. And so for me, it's just if I have McKinnon, I'm playing him because there's pass catching equity there. Overall, though, like just not really something I'm highly interested in.
No Hasty either, because we've seen what happened with like Deion Lewis the week that he came in, played well out of the game.
I mean, listen, I have some leagues that my running back situation is so bad. I'm fucking playing guys like Brian Hill this week, just hoping that it's the week he scores a touchdown because there's nothing else available. But like, yeah, I mean, you got, if you're pressed against the wall, like they're totally viable options. But if you have like, I guess what I'm saying is if you have guys that you could play instead, I don't think that they're people you want to go out and pick up because especially with San Francisco, Jeff Wilson scores 3 touchdowns this week and then doesn't play next week. And we've seen coaches all around the league pulling this shit with Cam Akers and a bunch of other guys. So, yeah.
425, the Kansas City Chiefs head to the Mile High City to play the Denver Broncos. There are going to be some weather concerns there in Denver, just as a heads up. Patrick Mahomes is at 74. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 61. Le'Veon Bell, we're not sure. I don't think he's going to play this week, but he possible at 44. Darrell Williams at 4,000. Tyreek at 64. Watkins is probably not going to play. Questionable, 46. Demarcus Robinson at 34. Kelsey, obviously, been a big last week at 63. Drew Lock at 51. Melvin Gordon should be back from his legal problems at 5,500. Philip Lindsay at 53. Tim Patrick, how good has he been at 46? Jerry Jeudy at 51. Noah Fant at 48. There is some weather. I don't really think it's going to be something that majorly impacts this game, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not as excited about the Chiefs as I normally would be.
Well, I heard that they were supposed to be up to like 5 inches of snow during the game, and that could have changed by now. But yeah, this is not something I'm getting super excited about. It's really yeah, it's really hard to like it's really hard to want to buy into Mahomes at 7,400, even though this is a matchup that he could easily feast on. Like, you just wonder what the game plan is going to be going into it. So I'm sure as hell not playing Drew Lock. I don't really have much interest playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I feel like that's a super trap spot after he had, a good game last week. They still rotate backs way too much, and that's what potentially keeps him from having those big upside games. I have some interest in Melvin Gordon. That's a really cheap price against a Chiefs defense that's really, really bad against the run. I think up until the Buffalo game, like it had been several games in a row that they'd given up like 140 yards rushing, and having that ability to catch the ball out of the backfield gives Gordon like a really safe floor. So I don't hate that. Then you get to the receiving options. I mean, 2 guys stick out here. including, well, let's do – so first of all, Travis Kelce has averaged 22 fantasy points against the Broncos over the last several meetings. I just don't think in cash games you're going to be able to get there, right? Last week was a lot easier too. I played him in cash. Maybe last week I had a good week in cash. I don't remember, but it could have been better because I didn't play Henry. But I played Kelce in cash, and it was a really strong move because he scored a lot of points. And then, it was 2 weeks ago I played Kelce, yeah. And then he did well again Monday, and he's always going to do well. He's a focal point of the offense. This is a great matchup for him. Great tournament play, probably not there for cash games. In terms of what do you do here? Patrick seems to be a deep threat. They're looking at him. I'm a little concerned with Fant back that a lot of those higher dollar targets come down because they were targeting Fant downfield a lot, it seemed like, too. More mouths to go around. And then Demarcus Robinson, super, super interesting at 3,400. He is on the field for Sammy Watkins. Let it be known that in 4 receiver sets, that is when Mecole Hardman is on the field. It is going to take a Tyreek Hill injury for Hardman to be out there as an every down player. So if you're giving me a guy who actually led the Chiefs in snaps at the wide receiver position at 3,400, knowing how high touchdown variance can be, it could certainly be a huge dud, especially considering the weather. $3,400, man, is, and you have to, you can't always look in the scope of who the player is, but what is the opportunity could be. Would you play Sammy Watkins at $3,400 this week? And I think
we say that, but then there's often, maybe with wide receivers it's different than running backs, but we say that with running backs, and the running backs almost never come up with that in that same opportunity.
Yeah, Mike Davis is a good example last week. I said all week, if you could get McCaffrey at 7,100, wouldn't you play him? But the reality is McCaffrey wouldn't have had any different opportunity, in my opinion, than Mike Davis had. It just didn't work out. Is
there a difference between running backs and wide receivers in that situation, do you think?
I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be making a lot more money on the NFL than I am. But I mean, you're talking about a guy who had 6 targets last week. Would you take 6 Pat Mahomes targets for 3,400? I think the answer is okay, I'll do that. Even if it's 5, maybe even if it's 4. I see this as being a 10 to 15 point play. Someone, if you're just damn sure that getting those 3 really good spot running backs is the way to go, he's a guy that gets you there.
Let's move on to yet another thrilling game. Jacksonville in Los Angeles, SoFi for the Chargers. The 4 o'clock games leave something to be desired this week.
Yeah, these are not good.
Justin Adebawor at 6,400. Kelly at 51. Josh Jackson questionable at 49. I'm not sure where they got. I mean, maybe the questionable played. I don't think the questionable played a role in that pricing, but it seems like those are flipped. Keenan Allen questionable at 62. Mike Williams at 47. Hunter Henry at 45. Flipping the other side, we've got Gardner Minshew at 59. Robinson at 62. Chart questionable at 55, and Chenault questionable at 45. I don't know. I look at it, and I mean, it's just I probably want to do a lot of 1 o'clock action.
I think both quarterbacks are in play here.
Could this be a game that you see just sneakily being 34-31?
Oh yeah. I think that there's a lot of good routes to go here. For one, like I said, both quarterbacks are in play and probably won't carry a lot of ownership. No one's playing Herbert at 6,400. I'd be willing to bet most people don't know that Herbert has been a really good fantasy quarterback, right? He's been super steady. I bet most people don't even know that,
Most people don't even know he's a quarterback.
That's true. The running back situation couldn't be any better. James Robinson gets a lot of opportunity, but because he plays for Jacksonville, just doesn't result in much. Everyone's waiting for that big game from him, and he had one against Miami, but other than that, it's been nothing. Then you look at the Chargers, and these are situations I love. You know who I'm going to play the hell out of this week? Josh Kelly, because everyone's damn sure that Justin Jackson is the 1A now. And this is what happens in the NFL. They go out there, and Justin Jackson's on the first drive, goes out, gets stuffed. Joshua Kelly runs in, breaks a 45-yard run, and guess what? All of a sudden, it's Joshua Kelly time, and now he's the guy. I mean, so what? They were like, I don't know the snap counts, but there was like, 4 touches difference? Okay. I believe in the talent of Josh Kelly a lot more than I do of Justin Jackson. I'm not saying it's a wide margin, but I'm going to go there. Keenan Allen, I hope he plays. This is a great, opportunity for him at a really, really good price. I would play him. He's cash viable. I really believe Keenan Allen at that price is cash viable. I think all of the Jacksonville guys are all tournament options because I don't know that any one of them sees enough consistent. I guess DJ Chark had 14 targets the last time he played, so it makes me feel a little bit like an asshole saying that. But
but Cole had almost 150 yards last week.
Yeah, Cole had 9 targets. It would be one of those two guys for sure. Chenault still stays, but you see what I'm saying? There's so many routes that it could possibly go. It's not easy enough to just be like, all right, it's clearly going to be Chenault or it's clearly going to be. So, yeah, and I mean, Hunter Henry, he's in play, but I feel like, he's getting a lot of targets, man. 4,500, though, I want to see more than a 13-point upside.
Would if Allen doesn't play, do you look towards Mike Williams?
I'm really not a Mike Williams guy. I understand against New Orleans that was the route.
That question, by the way.
Oh, it was a chat. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I hope Williams plays I hope Allen.
Yeah, it's a comment that I turned into a question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's 4,700. He's got slate breaking upside. And when you start looking through the list of the other receivers, it's not like you're like, oh, I'd rather play them instead. It gets really scary. If Keenan Allen's not in there, then suddenly this looks like a really bad team. You're missing your 2 best players. It's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be looking at this game like this, but we'll see. I think he was a limited participant, so that makes me feel a little bit better.
Okay. So before we break into the 8:20 game, I've got 2 questions I want to ask you. They're dumb questions, but real quick answers. Are we looking at a situation this year where Des Bryant ever becomes playable?
I have no idea. Who was talking to him? I forget.
Baltimore signed him to their practice squad. Antonio
Brown would be the worst possible thing to happen. Because what I think would really happen is he just destroys Seattle's team chemistry. And then even if he doesn't, all it's going to do is reduce the ceiling and floor of Metcalf and Lockett. So it's just one of those situations where probably from a football perspective, if he has his shit together, it's probably a good thing. But from a fantasy perspective, it's going to wreck a lot of people. But, hey, look, I was in first place in all of my best balls. And I have Dak Prescott in most of them, and he's gone, and Miles Sanders can't stay healthy or produce. So now, he's on the shelf for a while, and I have a lot of Lockett and Metcalf, pretty much one of each on all of my teams. So, hey, why not just keep the shitstorm coming and just bring Antonio Brown into it just to kill any of the chances I have at any of my best ball teams actually making it out alive.
This, folks, is what you call a segue. Speaking of Antonio Brown, how about those Seattle Seahawks, the 8:20 game in Arizona? Expect some fireworks in that one, most likely. Kyler Murray at 71, Kenyon Drake at 48, Chase Edmonds at 49. I kind of like Kenyon Drake. DeAndre Hopkins questionable at 82, Christian Kirk at 49. And then I'm not going to go tight ends. There's no point in that. Russell Wilson at 8,000, Chris Carson at 64, Tyler Lockett at 66, Metcalf at 72, Olsen at $3,600. Am I nuts for thinking that this may be last week what we saw out of Kenyon Drake? While one of it was a long run, I get it. I kind of think that he's at least earned himself some more carries this week against a team that you can run on.
Well, he's got 2 good weeks in a row, or 2-ish weeks in a row. One really good week, and then 1 week where he scored a touchdown, so it makes it seem better than it is. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this game. I mean, Wilson is there. Murray's there. I'd play Carson. I'd play Drake. I'd play Hopkins, Metcalf, Lockett, Kirk. I think one of my kind of like favorite sneaky tournament plays is Andy Isabella at 3,900. I mean, Murray continues to look for him downfield, and they literally just missed on a like 70-yard touchdown catch on the first play of the game Monday night, or else, Isabella would have had another, what would that have been, like another 15-point game at sub 4K, which is probably not going to win you a tournament. But in a game that should be a very, very, very fast-paced game, you have to look at the opportunity there, and I think the opportunity is there for Isabella to potentially, like, score. There's the potential he could score 2 touchdowns. It would have to be like a super lucky situation. But if they take 2 deep shots on him, like, this is a guy who could have 25 points and nobody knows how he got there. It's fringy. It's not like it's a 1% shot, but if you really want to differentiate yourself, like that's a route you could go.
All right. So break it down really quick for us. I know you mentioned Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara. What is in Galladay? What is cash looking like for you this week?
I haven't, like I said, it's the 3. At this point, it's going to be like the 3 running backs we've talked about ad nauseum. If Hunt's out, that's going to change. If Mixon's out, I would probably drop off Hunt at that point, to be honest with you, because I really think that I like the other 2 guys I'm playing a lot more than Hunt. He's kind of like the third piece, and he's dinged up, so it doesn't make me feel great. I'd rather play Gio there. And then at this point, like, Demarcus Robinson feels like it's too cheap that I would potentially use him. Deontay Johnson feels too cheap. I would consider using him. And that's pretty much, what I'm thinking of. I haven't really looked at defenses or anything like that yet. A lot of times I just build my lineup and see if I have anything left. If I don't, then I take a piece out, put a different player in that's less, and just kind of find a lineup I like and then play whatever defense. Because unless you're spending up for like a 4K defense that looks like they have a really good shot at like 10 plus fantasy points, there's really no point in spending that much time and effort on figuring out what defense you're going to play.
One last question for you. How much did you laugh at Daniel Jones last night?
I actually was on the road to West Virginia to enter my college football lineups, and I know he's become a meme, but it's typical. I mean, this guy, I had some optimism that once he got past those, like, and I don't think he had a bad game. I think he actually had the best game of his season last year, which is sad that that's the result of the best game of his season. But yeah, I mean, that's I saw that afterward and just had to kind of crack up and laugh.
All right, we have a breakdown of all breakdowns here of Week 7 in the NFL. The website, dfsheadquarters.com. We have some fantastic articles going up this week. We have the Asterisk article, Belmar, focusing on the World Series, the Dodgers and the Rays. We have the MMA article coming up, the UFC article coming up. Just a fantastic card highlighted by what could be the fight of the year with Khabib and Justin Gaethje. We just have a bunch of stuff. DFSheadquarters.com. It's all free. It's all, take a look. The articles are great. DFS Headquarters on Twitter. You get into our Discord. One of the best values in all of DFS. You hear from Nick and all the guys that provide the information on every sport, tennis, baseball. We'll go on and go on forever. He is at Nick from CWE. I am at HQ Golf Guy. DFSheadquarters.com. At DFS Headquarters on Twitter. Hit us up. Find out how to get in the Discord and get a chance to learn from Nick one-on-one. He's there. He'll help you out. Nick, thanks so much. Appreciate it. We will see you guys for Week 8. Thanks so much. Next time, go Dodgers.